Hello there, I'm Serhii Chernenko, and I'm Magento 2 front-end developer, and I have a lot of experience with Magento 2 instance, like native storefront, especially with UI components. My topic, you don't know, UI components is just Easter egg for Carl Simpson books. You don't know JavaScript, if you know what I mean. I found it really funny as a title. I want to prepare a cheat sheet for you. You could download the slides later after the meetup and use it as a cheat sheet just for you when you have some troubles with your components or if you have some gap in your knowledge. Let's start with my agenda for today, but I've prepared 60 slides for current presentation, but I have only 15 minutes. It's not enough to show everything. I want to focus only on the most important topics here. And let's start with initialization. I want to focus only on getTemplates and dependencies. You know that you could use getTemplate to render HTML knockout templates as HTML files, but probably you don't know that you could set a placeholder here to show something while the component is loading. Sometimes it's really useful not to see like empty container for that. Sometimes you need to specify that one component depends on another component. For example, here we have general components and depends. To specify what components has to be loaded first, you could use depth, either right direction of your thoughts how to do that, but depth inside defaults isn't working because this JavaScript file is already loaded. So it couldn't be set in right order because the component is ready. Instead, you have to specify these depths in the structure that provided to core app, for example, in XML structure, in JS layout, or in current structure in HTML file. Don't forget that depths you have to specify inside the structure before the component is loaded. Functional observables. Probably you all know how to work with them, but probably you don't know about the existing bug with them. For example, we have this structure with prop1, prop2. It just co-observable is okay, but we have two components, component 1, component 2, with the same JavaScript file. And for example, inside the JavaScript file in Initialize or in browser DevTools or in another component, you could update this observable, value in this observable. And we want to do that only for component 1. When you update this property as knockout observable, functional observable, it will be updated for all the components, for component 1 and for component 2. To avoid that, I want to present for you trackable observables. I prefer them and I always work only with them. I don't like functional observables. So to declare them is really easy. You could create a local property, just prop, for example, and then use this object tags and specify this variable like prop has to be tagged. Just set true here will be automatically created as a trackable observables. It's like the same as functional, but under the hood. So it just will create a getter and setter inside the object, in class. It will call as a function, but under the hood. You won't know about that. Other ways how to declare, you could use this observe inside a init observable function and specify a variable that you want to make trackable observable just true to make it not functional, just tag. And the third way, just use this tag and variable name. As I mentioned about the reactivity, functional observables has to be called as a function. To set a property, you have to call this as a function and provide a new value, or just call it as a function to get the value. With trackable observables, it's a bit easier. It looks like reactivity, just equal new value, and that's it. Or console this variable or get this variable by the name without any calling it as a function. A bit simple, looks as a modern stack, like when you work with React or Vue. Trackable way is more preferred for me and probably for you. But sometimes you need to get trackable observables as a functional observables. The shit happens, so probably you need it. And in this way, I prepared a way how to, for example, you have trackable observables as an object. It's not a good idea, but probably you need it. When you update value inside the object that has to be trackable, your template for this title, in props title, we have this title, but if you will update it as a quote, template won't change anything. It just doesn't watch that. You have to use like live hack to get observable from current context. This is the name of the trackable observables props, and then call the function value has mutated only for objects. For array, you don't need that. Trackable could be used for array without any additional life hacks. Probably you didn't know about stateful object inside defaults. It allows simply to save and get some data from local storage. So you just need to create some properties, for example, prop1, prop2, then use stateful, also declare what you want to save in local storage. And then, for example, you have input, as example, checkout with shipping form or something like that, where a user could specify, could type in just his name, last name, and then update the page, values will be predefined already in the component. So stateful is about that. So it's about the same functionality. And you could find in local storage in app data, example as a component name in the structure, and then prop1, prop2 is already saved. When you use UI layout, probably you already work with that. Sometimes you could render child components on the fly, but you don't see that rendered as template in the structure. It happens because you probably forgot to specify parent where to render this component. So parent is a really important thing. Don't forget about that. For example, you have parent component JavaScript files. Here is declare parent method, but how to call it in another component? It's really easy. In defaults, you could use object models, then local name, like variable name, parent component, and then specify the name of the component. And then you could use in this context parent component, call it as a knockout observable, functional observable, and then call its method. And this method will be called from another component. Sometimes it's really useful, you could use it. And something about debugging, it will be a short topic. In browser console, you could use this string. Anyway, you will download these files and you could copy this line and save you in your multi-buffer, for example, for copy pasting. By this string, you could get all the names of loaded components on each page. Sometimes it's really useful to check if the component is really loaded. As you can see, for example, here we have full names of each component. And you could get the instance by the name to get it just in console and work with that for any reasons that you need for your work, for debugging or something. To not specify the full name of the component, you could use it index is the last word after dot. For example, here we have mini card content that is the parent component, then subtotal in the nesting chain, then container, then subtotal. By the index, we could use only subtotal as a component name, the last component name in the chain, and it will be just short. And I want to say that UI registry is only about debugging. It's not like to get it to get some components or provide some data to components inside JS file. Use it only in browser console for debugging, and that's it. As you remember, you could get the instance of current component. You could use, you could update any checkable observables from browser. And sometimes it's really useful to check something, to update something, and just to debug. And here is everything why we hate UI components because of native syntax and with comments. Even PHP Storm couldn't highlight right, and we have to work with some comments. But anyway, even in this way, we could use it to debug something inside HTML file. And for example, data, probably you know about that, but also you could use console log inside text and debug current context. As you can see, here, especially inside context, you could get all the parents, root, and other, for example, data variables to understand where you are inside the current context. For example, when you have two for each in one HTML file, especially when one have property no child context to replace the data variable and some for each not. So it could be useful for you as well. Just use it. As you remember, Google Chrome blocked the extension Knockout UI Components Debugger. I forgot the name, but Knockout Debugger or something like that as extension. It was blocked. So if you don't have that, and if you don't know other ways, this console log inside text with current context will be useful for you to find something. The last thing is performance. You already know about for each because it's built-in function inside Knockout. Just imagine that you have array with 5,000 items, and there's example how long it's already clicked. We just wait while it will be rendering. Yeah, it's really long. But probably you don't know about fast for each. It's not a default function out of the box, but it's built in for Magento Knockout because it's a bit changed. And here you see how it's fast. But default for each could be used to render some UI components as instance objects. Yeah, but I don't recommend for using fast for each for rendering any components because you will have some bugs. But if you have plain array with some data that just have to be rendered, you could use fast for each. It's really fast. Is that it? Thank you. And if you have any question, just ask me.
I have a question about getting the data from the separate component. Let's imagine we have two child components. In one parent components, it's checkout, for example. One component is login email component, and the separate is shipping component. And I want to get the data from the shipping. Usually, I can define the component in the JavaScript file and then get the data. But in your case, in LabHack, you show how to get the data from the parent component. Could I use the same way to get the data from the separate child component?
Sure, you could share all the data between any components. It doesn't matter, parent, child, or side component.
Okay.
I just was limited by time, and I was hidden this file. But as you can see here, some example with imports and links, for example, and you could use imports for import some property from component 1 to component 2, as example. Yeah, but imports in the case if you don't expect that the value will be changed like for both sides, like connection relative between components. But if you need to update component, the variable in component 2 and make it updated for component 1 as well, you have to use links instead. So this is example how to use it. And as I said, you could download the slides and find more information than I could present now.
So better to use your case instead of usually define some components in define source line.
Yeah, in this case, better to use imports and links, and also imports and links works in XML structure. You don't need to use defaults or override or mixing some components. It will be easy to provide it with XML in some cases.
Yeah, just wanted to add, as I remember in documentation, it was called UI components linking. There is as well possibility in defaults to define exports and listens.
I also have this slide.
yeah. So maybe it as well will help. Listens will provide possibility kind of listen to some specific method of another component. So that's indeed very useful functionality, and it's much better than defining components through UI registry. Better to use imports, listens, links, and exports. Regarding Knockout context debugger, as you mentioned, that's kind of deprecated due to security issue. Currently, I'm working on our project with UI components, and I found another plugin for Chrome. Just sharing it with you here in Hangout. It's called Knockout Context Hoover. It's not that good as previous one, but that's a bit better than nothing. So as well can be used.
Honestly, I never used the previous extension. Probably it's old school, but I prefer just console log inside HTML, and it's fine.
Yeah, console never lies, so that as well.
Chrome extension was broken, as I know, but you can find it on GitHub and download the oldest version and install it again on your Chrome.
But I don't recommend using anything that banned by security reasons.
Okay, any other questions to Serhii? If not, then we can pass microphone to the next speaker. Thank you, Serhii.